With only hours left before his execution, a condemned man was offered the chance to make one final request. Most ask for food, some for family, others for silence. But this man's request stunned the prison. He didn't want a meal, a letter, or even a priest. He wanted to see his dog. What happened next would not only silence the guards, but it would unravel secrets that had been buried for years. That morning, the air inside the penitentiary felt heavier, as if the very walls themselves sensed that history was about to shift. The prison walls had never felt so suffocating. They stood tall, gray, and cold, like stone giants that swallowed men whole and kept their souls locked away. On most mornings, the noise of keys, boots, and clanging gates echoed without meaning, just another day in a place built for endings. But this morning, it was different. Every sound carried weight, as if the walls themselves knew that by sunset, a life would be erased. Daniel sat on the edge of his cot, his back hunched, hands loosely clasped together. The dim light from the small barred window above carved shadows across his face. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this place years ago, head high with defiance. Time had chipped away at him. Guilt, regret, and years of silence had left their mark. His hair was streaked with gray, his once sharp eyes dulled but not empty, never empty. For 7 years, Daniel had carried the label of murderer. For 7 years, he had worn chains heavier than steel. The chains of being hated, of being forgotten, of being judged without a voice. And now, those years had run out. The papers had been signed. The hour was fixed. Soon, he would walk the final hallway where footsteps echoed like a funeral drumbeat. The guards expected the usual last request. Most men asked for steak, fried chicken, or one last slice of pie. Some begged for a phone call to family, a final prayer, a cigarette to steady their shaking hands. The men of death row rarely surprised anyone. But Daniel did. When the warden entered his cell and asked, "What's your last request?" Daniel's voice didn't tremble. He didn't look up. He just whispered, "I want to see Max. My dog." Silence. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Some smirked, others frowned. A condemned man asking to see a dog instead of a human? It was unheard of. But Daniel's eyes, when he finally lifted them, burned with a quiet certainty. He didn't want forgiveness from people who had long abandoned him. He didn't want to taste food he could never eat again. He didn't want words. He wanted the only soul who had stood by him before the arrest, before the trial, before the world turned its back. Max wasn't just a dog. He was family. He was loyalty. He was the last piece of home Daniel still carried in his heart. The warden leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. He had seen strange requests before, ice cream, guitars, even men asking for silence. But a dog? On execution day? It was a security risk, a break from protocol, something that could stir the entire prison. Yet when he flipped through Daniel's file, something caught his eye. No fights. No escape attempts. No infractions. Daniel had been a model prisoner. And in the notes, owned a German shepherd named Max for 8 years. Loyal companion. After a long silence, the warden gave a slow nod. 10 minutes. In the yard. Under strict supervision. Word spread like wildfire. Inmates whispered through cell bars. Guards shook their heads. Some laughed at the absurdity. Others, though they would never admit it, felt a strange tug at their chest. In a place where men were reduced to numbers, Daniel had asked for something human. Something pure. And so, the stage was set. As Daniel waited, his heart pounded with a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. Somewhere out there, beyond the prison walls, Max was on his way. He didn't know if his dog would even remember him after all this time. He didn't know if those familiar eyes would look at him with love, or confusion. But he prayed. He prayed harder than he ever had in his life. In that cold cell, with hours left to live, Daniel finally whispered the words he had never dared speak before. "Don't forget me, Max, please." And somewhere beyond steel gates and miles of silence, a black and tan German shepherd stirred, ears pricking, as if he already knew that fate was calling him back to his master. The prison yard had never been this quiet. Usually, it echoed with the metallic slam of gates, the distant shouts of inmates, or the heavy boots of guards on patrol. But on this morning, silence pressed down like a storm about to break. Every eye in the towers, every guard by the gates, seemed fixed on one thing, the far entrance, where something extraordinary was about to happen. Daniel stood in the center of the yard, wrists cuffed loosely in front of him. A single chair had been placed there, but he couldn't sit. His legs trembled, his heart pounded too hard to rest. He hadn't seen Max in 7 years. 7 years of gray walls, locked doors, and dreams that faded with time. And yet, in his heart, the image of Max was as sharp as the day he last saw him, strong, loyal, eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. The gate creaked. The sound sliced through the silence. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. 2 officers stepped in, leashes tight in their hands. Between them walked a German shepherd. His black and tan coat gleamed under the pale morning light, though streaks of gray now touched his muzzle. His steps were slower than Daniel remembered, but his posture was proud, his head held high. It was Max. For a moment, Daniel couldn't move. His body locked, his throat ached. Years of regret, sorrow, and loneliness crashed down all at once. He wanted to run forward, but the cuffs chained him back. All he could do was whisper the name that had lived in his heart every day since his arrest. Max. The dog froze. His ears shot forward. His tail twitched, then wagged once. His eyes locked onto Daniel's face, and in that instant, 7 years melted away. The leash went slack. The officers glanced at the warden. A single nod. Then Max surged forward. The leash slipped from the guard's hand as the dog sprinted across the yard. Dust flew from his paws, his body a blur of motion. Daniel dropped to his knees, chains clattering, arms open. The collision was fierce. Max slammed into him, chest against chest, knocking the air from his lungs. The dog pressed his head against Daniel's shoulder and whined, a sound caught between joy and grief, a cry years in the making. Daniel buried his face in Max's fur. The smell of earth, of leather, of home, it filled his lungs, burned his throat, brought tears he hadn't let fall in years. His voice cracked as he whispered over and over. Good boy, good boy. I missed you, buddy. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For a moment, the prison vanished. There was no death order, no execution clock ticking down. Just a man and his dog, 2 souls torn apart by fate and stitched back together by love. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Some turned away, their eyes burning. Others stared in awe, as though witnessing something sacred. Even hardened men, used to chains and despair, felt their chests tighten. Then, suddenly, Max froze. His body went rigid, muscles tight. His tail stopped mid-wag, ears pivoting sharply. A low, guttural growl rumbled from his chest, deep, primal, dangerous. Daniel felt it vibrate against his ribs. Slowly, he lifted his head, following Max's gaze. 10 feet away stood Officer Jenkins. Tall. Stiff. Hands clasped behind his back. His expression unreadable. Max's growl deepened, teeth flashing in a silent warning. Daniel stiffened. In all the years he had raised Max, he had never seen him growl without reason. Max wasn't just reacting. He was remembering. The yard grew tense. A few guards muttered, "Control your dog." One even stepped forward. But Daniel laid a trembling hand on Max's back. "Easy, boy, it's okay." But it wasn't. Deep inside, Daniel knew it wasn't. Dogs don't forget. And Max had just uncovered something no one else had seen. The reunion that was meant to bring peace had just ignited the beginning of a storm. The joy of reunion still lingered in Daniel's chest, but Max's growl changed everything. It wasn't the playful bark of excitement or the whine of longing. No, this was primal, sharp, a warning forged by instinct. Max stood stiff, his body angled toward Officer Jenkins. The fur along his back rose like a blade of steel. His lips curled, teeth flashing white. His eyes locked on Jenkins with a ferocity that silenced the entire yard. Guards exchanged uneasy glances. Some muttered under their breath. "What's wrong with the dog? Maybe he's just nervous." "No. That's not nervous. That's a threat." Daniel's pulse quickened. He knew Max better than anyone. This wasn't random. Max wasn't the kind of dog who growled at shadows or strangers without cause. When Max growled, it meant danger. It meant truth. Daniel whispered, his hand resting on the dog's neck. "Easy, boy, what is it? What do you see?" Max didn't flinch. He didn't blink. His growl rumbled louder, aimed like a weapon at Jenkins, who stood frozen, jaw tight, avoiding eye contact. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The warden, watching from the tower above, leaned forward. "What's going on down there?" His voice echoed, sharp. No one answered. Jenkins shifted his weight, his hands tightening behind his back. The gesture was small, but Max reacted instantly. His growl snapped into a sharp bark, teeth bared, body lunging forward against Daniel's grip. Guards reached for weapons, but Daniel shouted quickly, "No. Don't touch him." His voice cracked, desperate. The yard buzzed with whispers now. Inmates pressed against their cell windows, trying to see. Guards murmured, unsure. One voice broke through, Officer Ramirez, an older guard who had always treated Daniel with a quiet fairness. "That's not normal," Ramirez said flatly, stepping closer. His eyes never left Jenkins. "Dogs don't react like that unless they know something." Daniel's heart thudded. His mind raced. Max had never been wrong before. 7 years apart, and his dog still knew how to see through the masks of men. Ramirez's voice dropped low, so only Daniel could hear. "Funny thing. Jenkins was on duty the night you were arrested. But his name's not in the report." The words struck Daniel like a bullet. He swallowed hard, staring at Max, whose growl had not eased for a second. If Jenkins had been there that night, why had it been hidden? Why had no one mentioned it? Daniel's eyes flicked to Jenkins. The officer's jaw was clenched tight, his face pale under the harsh morning light. Max growled louder, pressing closer to Daniel, as if trying to shield him from something invisible. The air turned heavy, thick with suspicion. Every man in that yard felt it, the sense that something was wrong, deeply wrong. The warden's voice thundered again from the tower. "Stand down. Someone explain what's happening here." But no one spoke. Not yet. Because for the first time in years, Daniel felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. Not freedom, not yet. But a sliver. A crack in the wall of silence. And it had come, not from lawyers or witnesses or judges, but from the low growl of a dog who refused to forget. The prison had grown restless. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps. Inmates pressed their faces against cell bars, straining to catch fragments of the scene unfolding in the yard. Guards lingered at their posts, exchanging uneasy looks. Everyone knew something unusual had just happened, a dog had seen what no man could. That night, after the yard was cleared, Daniel was led not to his cell, but to a small, dimly lit interview room. His wrists were cuffed, his steps heavy, but his heart raced with a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. Max padded beside him, leash held tight by Officer Ramirez, though it was clear the dog needed no restraint. His eyes never left the door, ears pricked, body taut as if waiting for danger to appear. The warden sat at a metal table, his fingers steepled, his eyes cold but curious. Across the room stood Jenkins, stiff, jaw locked. Ramirez leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. The air felt electric, thick with something unspoken. The warden broke the silence. "Officer Jenkins, why did you fail to disclose that you were present the night of Daniel's arrest?" Jenkins didn't flinch. His voice was clipped, controlled. "I wasn't on duty. I was passing by. It didn't matter." Max barked sharply, the sound bouncing off the walls like a gunshot. He lunged forward, teeth bared, growl rolling low and dangerous. Ramirez's grip tightened on the leash, but even he looked shaken. "That's no coincidence," Ramirez muttered under his breath. Daniel's heart pounded. His eyes darted between Max and Jenkins. Memories flooded back, the night of the arrest, the confusion, the evidence that never quite made sense. Could it be? Had Jenkins been there not as a bystander, but as something else? The warden's gaze sharpened. "Control your dog," he ordered. But Daniel shook his head. His voice was steady, quiet, but heavy with truth. "Max doesn't lie. If he growls like that, it's because he remembers something we don't." Ramirez shifted, eyes narrowing at Jenkins. "Funny, because earlier today, a witness came forward. Said they saw someone leaving Daniel's house the night of the crime. Someone matching your description." The room froze. The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Jenkins' eyes flickered, just for a second. His jaw tightened further. But Max didn't miss it. He barked again, sharp, violent, echoing like thunder. His body shook with fury, his hackles raised. The warden leaned forward, his voice low but cutting. "We're reopening the case. Effective immediately, the execution is delayed." Daniel's breath caught. For the first time in 7 years, air filled his lungs not like poison, but like life. He wasn't free, not yet. But the chain had cracked. The wall had split. And hope, fragile, trembling, stepped into the room. Jenkins glared at him, eyes burning with silent rage. But it didn't matter. Because in that moment, Daniel wasn't alone. Max pressed against his leg, steady, unyielding. His dog had waited 7 years for this moment. 7 years to bring truth into the light. And now, the world would finally listen. Days turned into weeks, but inside the prison walls, time moved differently. For Daniel, every second after the warden's words felt like walking a tightrope between life and death. His execution was delayed, yes, but the shadow of the chair still hung over him. He slept lightly, his mind haunted by the possibility that it could all slip away. Yet every morning, when he opened his eyes and saw Max curled by the bars of his temporary holding space, watching him with steady devotion, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in 7 long years. Hope. The investigation moved swiftly. Ramirez pushed quietly behind the scenes, determined to expose the truth. Witnesses who had once stayed silent found their voices. Fingerprints were re-examined with modern technology. And piece by piece, the story that had condemned Daniel unraveled like rotten thread. Max was there for every step. Each time Jenkins was questioned, each time evidence was laid on the table, the dog's instincts never wavered. He growled when lies were spoken. He calmed when truth was revealed. It was as if the animal carried inside him a compass that pointed only toward justice. One night, Daniel sat in his cell, Max lying with his head pressed against the bars. Daniel whispered through the darkness, his voice raw. "You saved me, boy. Even when the world gave up, you didn't. You knew, you always knew." Max's tail thumped once against the concrete floor, as if answering, "I never left." The hammer finally fell. New evidence confirmed what Max had known all along: Jenkins had been at the crime scene the night of the murder. His fingerprints were found where they shouldn't have been. The witness testimony matched his face. And soon, under the weight of proof, Jenkins cracked. The same man who had stood tall in the yard now sat in handcuffs, his head bowed. The guards who once followed his orders now stared at him with contempt. He was no longer the accuser. He was the accused. When the news reached Daniel, his knees nearly buckled. The charges against him were dropped. The papers that had once sentenced him to die were replaced with orders for release. For the first time in 7 years, the prison gates were no longer a wall, they were a doorway. The walk to freedom. The day Daniel was freed, the sky was bright, the air sharp with the scent of spring. As the gates creaked open, he stepped forward slowly, each step almost unbelieving. No chains. No guards at his side. No echo of boots driving him toward death. And there, waiting just beyond the fence, was Max. His ears perked, his tail wagged furiously, and his bark rang out like a song of victory. Daniel dropped to his knees, tears streaming as Max bounded into his arms. He buried his face in the thick fur, sobbing, his voice breaking. "We made it, boy, we made it." The guards watching, men who had seen countless inmates leave in silence, found themselves swallowing hard. Some turned away, blinking back emotion they didn't want to admit. This wasn't just release. It was resurrection. Daniel didn't return to the man he once was. Prison had carved scars too deep to erase. But he wasn't broken. With Max at his side, he walked into a new life, determined to live not as the world had judged him, but as his dog had always believed he was: loyal, loving, worthy of trust. In the months that followed, Daniel and Max became symbols. Their story spread far beyond the prison walls. Newspapers called Max a dog detective, a four-legged witness to truth. For Daniel, the attention didn't matter. What mattered was waking up each morning to the sound of paws on the floor, to the warmth of loyalty beside him. The world had stolen 7 years. But Max had given him back his future. Years later, when Max grew older and his muzzle turned fully gray, Daniel would sit beside him on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the horizon. He would stroke his fur gently and whisper, "You saved me, old friend. They'll never forget us. I'll never forget you." And when Max's final day came, Daniel held him close, just as Max had once pressed against him in the prison yard. He buried him under the wide oak tree near the house, marking the spot with a simple stone. "Here lies Max, the dog who remembered." This was more than a story of a man and his last wish. It was proof that loyalty has no chains, that love carries memory, and that sometimes, the truest witness to justice doesn't speak with words, but with a growl, a bark, and eyes that never forget. Daniel's life was spared not by law or mercy, but by the faith of a dog who refused to abandon him. And to this day, their story remains a reminder: when the world turns its back, a dog will not.